I've been teaching art for more than 20 years, and I'm going to share with you 5 common mistakes that beginning artists make with perspective and how to fix them. The first one is vertical lines. When you're looking straight at a building, most of the time all of your vertical lines will be parallel. When I line up this T-square, you can see that all of the posts and edges of the windows are perpendicular to the bottom of the page and parallel to one another. It's the same with this building. And even when there are multiple buildings, the vertical lines will almost always be parallel, unless the buildings or elements have settled in a particularly wonky fashion. But even that's more the exception than the rule. With three-point perspective, as you look up, the sides of the building will slightly point in towards each other and eventually meet at a single point far off your paper. But here the wooden posts and windows are still parallel. This student has drawn the edges of the building angling away from one another, and hardly any of the posts or windows are parallel. It's the same with the windows on this building. You want to make sure your vertical lines are parallel unless you're using three-point perspective or there's an unusual feature. The second mistake is not getting the angles correct on windows and doors. New artists usually know that when you look at a building from the front, all of the horizontal lines will be parallel, which means the tops and bottoms of the windows and doors are parallel to one another and the eaves. But if you take just a few steps to the right, the whole perspective shifts, and all of those lines will now be at angles that slope to the left and will eventually converge at a single point. And drawing those lines correctly can be confusing. Your brain will try to override what your eyes actually see, and often end up with something like this, where the lines are still parallel, but there's awkward space at the bottom, or some combination of angled and parallel lines that just look wrong. But don't worry, I'm here to help. Just place 2 straight edges along the lines you know are normally parallel and see where they meet. That's your vanishing point, and it will usually be off your paper. And notice how all of the converging lines above the horizon line angle slightly down towards the vanishing point, while the ones below it angle slightly up towards it. And all of those angled lines will now meet at that point and will look okay again, like magic, or like a good drawing. The third mistake comes from a confusion about horizon lines. You may have been taught that the horizon line is where the earth meets the sky, and that's where you can find your vanishing point where all lines meet. Or maybe you were told that it's really the eye level, or that the horizon line is the eye level. This is where many new artists get confused, and the truth is a little bit of both. Let me explain. In nature, you'll see the horizon line at your eye level. If you're standing or sitting, your eyes will adjust it. But in an interior scene or a close detail of a village, you want to look for the eye level. In this scene, I might assume that the base of this building is the horizon line, but in reality, the horizon line will be somewhere hidden behind this building, so I want to look for the eye level. I have a few clues, like this lady's head and where the lines of these buildings become horizontal, but the tried and true way is to take 2 straight edges and place one along the top of a building and the other with a window or a ledge I know is parallel to it. This helps me find the true eye level, which is also the horizon line, somewhere visible only to Superman. And now you, sort of. The fourth mistake comes when trying to draw buildings on a hill or at different angles. Did you know that when you draw buildings that aren't parallel to one another or are on a hill, they will often have different vanishing points? Here's why and how to find them. Buildings in linear perspective will have the same vanishing point when they're parallel to one another, like in a city that has streets arranged in a grid. But many villages and cities have streets that are curved and built on hills, and the buildings in them are often not parallel to one another and will all have different vanishing points. But here's a cool fact. The horizon line will be the same. You can see here that the converging lines for each building in this scene has a different vanishing point, but they all fall on the same line. And remember, that's because the horizon line is at eye level, and even though the buildings might be crooked, your eyes aren't. At least I hope not. The fifth mistake is drawing rooftops, and as a bonus, drawing items as they recede into the distance. A really common mistake with new artists is not getting the pitch of a roof correct. This student made theirs a bit skew-if, and I'm going to show you how to fix it. When you're looking straight at a building, draw a line connecting one corner to another, and then again with the other 2 corners. The middle point of this X shows you where the center is. Draw a vertical line through this to the highest point of the roof, and then angled lines to get a correctly centered roof. This medieval building is like a cake with different tiers, so we're going to look only at the top section to find the center and fix it. Draw an X to find the center, a vertical line through it, and then angled lines to connect the top beam to the building. And now it's correct. If the angled roof is on the side of a building, you can find the center the same way. The back pitch of the roof will usually be a parallel angle to the front. You can use the same technique for finding the center of a building to figure out how objects that are the same length apart become smaller as they recede in the distance. Start with your horizon line and vanishing point, and draw your first vertical line. We'll say this is a telephone pole. Connect the top and bottom of this pole to the vanishing point, and then draw your second pole. You have to guess on this first one. Keep the top and bottom between the converging lines. Then draw an X connecting the tops and bottoms of the poles. Find the center of the X and draw a line connecting it to the vanishing point, and draw a dot where this line passes through the second pole. You then draw a line from the top of the first pole and through that dot, stopping on the converging line. This is the bottom of the third pole. Draw a vertical line from there between the two converging lines, and now you can repeat that process. Draw an X connecting the second and third poles. Notice that the second point falls on the same line that connects the center of the first X to the vanishing point. Draw a line from the top of the second pole through that dot, again stopping on the converging line, and that's the bottom of your fourth pole. Repeat this process as many times as you need to. Notice that you don't need to draw the X each time. You only need to draw a line connecting the top of the previous pole through the point where the line intersects the most recent pole. As long as the items or buildings are spaced equally apart, this will show you how they get smaller as they get further away. The closer you are to a building, the more extreme the distance will seem. Remember, in linear perspective, that you will have 4 types of lines: vertical, horizontal, converging lines that go to a vanishing point, and angled lines for things like angles of a roof. Thanks so much for watching. If you'd like to know more about drawing or painting, I have tutorials and live streams available on my Patreon, or just subscribe and hit the notifications so you don't miss my next video here. See you soon.